Directed and produced by Stanley Nelson and Lawrence Grant in 2015, Black Panthers Revisited is a short documentary of a hybrid expository and performative mode which informs its audience of the police violence against African Americans in the 1960s, which led to the formation of the Black Panther Party as a form of self-defense. Today, this presentation will aim to provide an analysis of the modes present in the film, as well as the director's style, and the way these two elements influence the overall content of the film. We will then look at how these three elements come together to create the individual form of this documentary. As previously stated, this documentary is a hybrid of an expository and performative mode. Nichols suggests that the expository mode is distinctive for its voiceover narrator, who is off-screen and guides interpretations, its literal tone and the way it puts across an argument that is concise and to the point, its informative nature, its direct and specific delivery of information, and the way it can persuade and change audiences' attitudes. The performative mode, on the other hand, is distinctive for being strongly personal by providing personal experience from the perspective of the filmmaker, calling for an emotional response from its audience, pursuing the truth of what it feels like to experience the world in a particular way, and treating knowledge as what we learn from experiential encounter rather than secondhand from experts or books. Several of these elements are evident in Nelson and Grant's documentary. For example, Stanley Nelson's voice narrates the documentary off-screen and holds the weight and control of explaining and arguing the film's theoretical content, thus adhering to the expository mode of voiceover narration, as well as the performative mode by incorporating his own voice and experiences, which makes the film very personal and shows the perspective of the filmmaker. This is evident when he says, "I, myself, have been stopped on the street, searched, and have had a gun held to my head." It also incorporates historical footage and images that show the Black Panther Party from the 1960s and the way these people were mistreated by police. This footage and imagery is a visual tactic and gives rise to what Nichols refers to as evidentiary editing, a practice that documentaries of an expository mode use in order to illustrate and support what is being spoken by the narrator. The film also contains interviews from people who were a part of the Black Panther Party, and this adheres to the expository mode of including interviews, but also to the performative mode, by the knowledge provided being based on experiential encounters rather than from experts or books. Other aspects that adhere to the expository mode include the seriousness of the topic being discussed, which enforces a very literal tone and puts across a concise argument that is to the point, that argument being that African Americans were and still are victims of police violence. The film is also of an informative nature and represents and reflects a historical view of realism, all of which adhere to the expository documentary mode. So next we're going to analyse Stanley Nelson's and Lawrence Grant's style and unpack how their style and the previously discussed expository and performative modes impacts the way the content is presented in the film. So Nelson and Grant have several notable films which examine the history and experiences of African Americans. Mostly all of their work, just like Black Panthers Revisited, documents Black life in America and the issues they have contended with and still contend with today. As I have already mentioned, the film is of an expository and performative mode. The performative mode of the documentary has the most recognisable impact on the content of the film. Due to the filmmaker including the personal experience that he has encountered on the topic under discussion, it calls for an emotional response from us as an audience, which assists in developing a deeper understanding of the issue being discussed, as well as makes us as an audience have sympathy for the people portrayed in the film. Due to the knowledge provided being based on experiential encounters, it further reinforces to the audience that the content being spoken about is real and has been experienced firsthand by these people, which then again further reinforces this emotional response and assists in developing a strong connection between the audience and the subject. It is the three of these elements combined, the mode, the content, and the style, that creates the documentary's individual form. As I have mentioned earlier, Stanley Nelson and Lawrence Grant have directed several documentaries that examine similar issues that are present in the Black Panthers Revisited. They both have a similar style that has been shaped by their own beliefs and experiences as African Americans. They both also use different elements of the documentary modes, like the expository and performative mode, as well as their own style in order to create this specific form of documentary that educates its audience on the many racial discrimination issues that African Americans have been subjected to and are still subjected to today. Evidence of this is provided in a recent interview where Stanley Nelson notes that when he began creating the film, The Black Panthers Revisited, he didn't anticipate that it would be released at a time when issues of police brutality and justice for African Americans were so prominent. And this has made people want to see the film in order to understand how this was happening 50 years ago and is still happening now. Thank you.